Hello and welcome to Sensitivity Doctors. We are so excited about our guest today, and our topic is going to be as fun as you can imagine. It's all about play.
Oh, this is going to be such a great topic. I'm Jean. This is Dr. Kelly, and we're here to host you today with the amazing Acey Holmes. So if you're interested in this episode, stay tuned.
I am so excited to introduce Acey Holmes, our guest today, who is a dynamic speaker, consultant, and advocate for using play and flow to improve work and life. With a background in education and communication sciences, she turns complex neuroscience into engaging and practical advice. Her workshops and consulting help teams boost creativity, connection, and morale with easy-to-apply strategies. She is the founder of Boardless, which is an innovative company with a mission to revolutionize corporate cultures and employee experience. Acey's most recent TED Talk, Play the Cure for Burnout, was recently released, and we are thrilled to have her here to learn all about key strategies, ways to use play to avoid burnout, especially for highly sensitive people. And we just can't wait to get started. So welcome, Acey.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm
Yes.
excited.
And I say most recent TED Talk because did you do more than one? I think I found a second.
Oh, wow.
So there's like little baby TED Talks kind of in the HR world. It's called Disrupt HR. And then there's that platform is based on a program called Ignite Talks, which both exist in a lot of cities around the world. So if you've ever wanted to like practice being on stage, give Disrupt HR and Ignite Talks a chance. They are 5 minutes long, max. They will boot you off the stage.
Oh, wow.
And then you have 20 slides that auto advance every 15 seconds. So it's a neat little challenge. So I've done a couple of those.
I am loving that because a TED Talk is on my bucket list, admittedly. So I will have to look into that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So fun. So
Oh, yeah.
you
And
do
you would
have
be
a
great on a TED Talk. You would be amazing on a TED
You
Talk.
would be, Amelia.
You are
Oh, yeah.
already
Me.
amazing
Yeah.
on a TED Talk. I watched your TED Talks, but
I agree, Jean. Amelia, you'd be amazing.
It's funny sometimes in sessions, if I go on too much of a tangent about psychoeducational things, I will look at my client and go, and now the end of my TED Talk.
The conclusion.
But Acey, you have a really interesting background. You did not start in the arena you're in now. So how did that happen? And I do believe it also had a little bit of a journey with burnout. So I'd love for you to unpack that for us.
Yeah. So I was in what I have been calling recently the perfect intersection of education and healthcare. And that has been what it has been in America for the past 5-10 years. It was really hard. I was a home health speech pathologist working with kids, have done that for 20 years and loved it, as I say in my TED Talk, until I didn't. Burnout kind of snuck up on me because of how much I really had loved my career for so long, and it was rewarding and it was fairly autonomous, and it was just really great until it wasn't. And then kind of pivoting into this role is where I began to self-reflect and realize where that burnout had come from, which was just a lack of play for myself, even though I was playing for a living on the floor with little kids. So it's an interesting insight for me.
I'm curious, and I had not planned on asking this, but I'm thinking as a listener, I would want to know, how do you know if you're experiencing burnout? I'm sure it's deeply personal.
Sure. Yeah. Different for everybody. But I think probably your biggest sign is that something shifts in what you care about. So like I said, if you look back on my Facebook memories, there are days where I was posting, it's 6 a.m. in the morning and I'm so excited to go to work. And I would talk about that all the time, how much I loved my job. And then in that time of life, I had a really great team. My bosses, I would give them a shout out because I don't get to do it often. Karen Parrish and Emily Berry were just really amazing professionals and wonderful people. And it was just so great. And I was very good at it. Also, I really always had been. So that's one of those things too, where you get to like, why wouldn't you enjoy this if you're so good at it?
Yeah.
And and this was before the pandemic too, when I started to wake up and realize, oh no, I'm feeling drained. I feel exhausted when I'm not, overexerting myself, really, because the job wasn't difficult in itself. Which then leads into I wasn't feeling challenged. I also wasn't seeing, so working with little kids, again, amazing. But in the realm of home healthcare, they go to school and they stop seeing me. So then I have no idea if anything I ever did made a difference in their life. So sometimes you would see like a light bulb moment or whatnot, but there was a lot of, that was probably helpful. Just sort of a
That
lot
must
of
have been
unknown.
hard for you, though. That must have been
It was
really
not
hard.
great. It was not great. It's pretty bad. So I think to realize when you notice a shift in something that was nice or going really well before, and then suddenly you almost hate it, that can be a big sign. Exhaustion is usually another good sign too.
I think that's a really key point to pull out that you said, if you stop caring about something you did care deeply about before.
That was the same for me as well when I hit burnout, because I was in the human rights space and I was very deeply passionate about it. And all of a sudden I found myself in this space where I didn't want to get up in the morning. Like I was so demotivated. It felt like even the smallest thing I had to do that I usually like doing, I just hated. I just couldn't. It was just such fatigue. And then you start wondering, wait, what has happened here?
Jeanne, I'm curious if you noticed it carry over into your personal life, because I think there's probably people listening going, isn't that what they say about depression? Like you're supposed to notice depression, like suddenly you don't care about the things you used to. But at first anyways, if you let the burnout go too long, it will transfer. But everything about my personal life I still enjoyed. I was still doing the things that I like to do. I was being with friends. I was being very social, but it was specific for me to work. I'm curious if it was that for you, Jeanne.
In that instance, yes. So the first time, yes.
Right.
But I was in a position where I was traveling maybe between 10 and 12 times a month. I was almost never sleeping at home.
A lot.
It was just too much. Like I just didn't want, I was so demotivated. I was so fatigued. But I love being home and I love doing the things that I love doing with my family. But just from this job that I always used to love, that I was so passionate about, all of a sudden just didn't keep me warm and fuzzy.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where play came in for you, and I love anyone who cares deeply about something and dives into the research. And I love how you dove into the research to break down things that I've never even heard about play. So I would love if you could unpack for us the phases of play and how they impact the brain and body, so that as we talk about how this impacts generalized burnout and burnout for highly sensitive folks, we all kind of are on the same page about what's happening with our bodies.
Sure. Yeah, I feel lucky because when I decided to make this pivot, there were people in, lucky is luck, right? Like, what is luck? I put myself in a position.
Fortunate.
I tried to get involved with the toy industry, which is why these people were in my life. Anyway, I was watching other people already take play outside of just with kids. So I was seeing that happen, and I was able to draw inspiration from each of them. And happened very early on in my studies of, what am I going to do with this? I know what I want to do. How do I do it? Who's going to pay for this? How do we do this? And that's where I feel fortunate that I rediscovered Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, flow, the book.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, that's the flow state?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he is considered the father of flow. And when I started rereading this, coupled with everything I've ever been, I was lucky in my undergrad and graduate career that I was trained that play was important for children. So I knew a lot about what it did for the brain and development and that kind of thing. Not everything they taught was right. That's a different story. But when I started reading this, I started to really see a lot of overlaps. And so there I always feel like I'm going to get this backwards because I'm not a math person. This is a math thing. All flow is play, but not all play is flow. So
Okay.
You did that awesome.
that's like a
That
lot.
was
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But I always worried I'm going to
Perfect.
get it backwards, but that's the right way.
That's like me, the 6.5 dozen eggs in the egg thing
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the
Yeah, like,
whatever
which way
that
is it?
saying is. It's probably an
Wait,
American saying, Jean.
Oh.
Oh,
Is that the thing
Huh?
about? Huh?
Do you know what it is,
Eggs.
Acey, with the eggs? What is that
So
saying?
it's 6 to a dozen half. No, see, I don't know. Half
See?
eggs to another.
Oh, the half
Oh.
a dozen of the one is a something of the
6
other. I
to
think.
another. But are
Oh,
eggs
yeah.
even in it? But exactly. This
Who
one,
knows?
yes.
Okay.
That's
Yes.
the point.
But flow, back to flow.
Now my husband's walking upstairs saying it exactly correctly. It's 6 to 1, half dozen to another. Boom.
Ooh,
Thank you, Mike.
thank you.
Anyway, so all flow is play, not all play is flow. But there was just so much overlap to me. And the thing is, there's not a lot of research, especially not recent research, on adults being playful or what play means for adults or what play really is for adults. There's a ton out there about children, about animals. One of my favorite researchers, I'm pretty sure I'm not saying his name right, Jaak Panskep.
Is he Swedish?
Probably it's Jaak. Jaak.
J-A-A-K.
Maybe?
Yeah, Jock. Yeah.
You could call him the rat tickler. That's what
The rat tickler.
Yeah. That's what a lot of his research was tickling rats. And like, so then he did a lot of research on the play because laughter. But that's what he's maybe most well known for, is tickling rats.
That's so
The
funny.
whole lab of it. But so that kind of research is there, but it's animals. You know, obviously we can make a lot of translatable take interpretations, but there's just not a lot directly on adults. Fortunately, it really is starting to come out. So like my website is playfulworkdesign.com. And if you Google that, I don't come up first. Oh no, SEO nightmare. But I'm okay with it because white papers come up first. So people are studying playful work design from like a job crafting standpoint. So the research isn't out there, but I was happy to find that the flow has so much overlap because there's a ton of research on that. So I started to take what Jaak Panskep, Gokhan Gunas, Peter Gray, Stuart Brown, the Lego Foundation actually does a lot of third-party research on just play, not their toys.
Oh, cool.
That has a lot of great information. So I took all of that, compared it to flow, and then found these starting to come out more playful work design. There's a researcher named Renee Proyer who's doing studies on personality science, and his focus, for a while anyway, I hope he continues, is adult playfulness and what that means. So I put it all together and made, so I have a definition of play. It's a functional, operational definition of play. And then deep into my studies of this, I came across the work of Herbert Benson, who was a cardiologist, who was studied by a journalist named Stephen Kotler, who has really brought out this concept of flow being a cycle and not just a state.
Okay.
And that's also a lot of where the flow being play comes into it, is this concept of the cycle. So 8 characteristics of play are, here's what happens when I list things. I forget one. It might be different every time. I could list 2 things, I'll forget one. 8 things, I'm going to tell you 7. And then in 10 minutes, I'm going to go, oh, the 8th one. We'll see what we get through. So play is personal. Play is joyful. Play is beneficial. Play is iterative. You have to be able to change it a little bit each time.
Oh, interesting.
play is optional. Now, I now make my living on helping people play at work. So sometimes the things that we're doing and adding play or turning playful are not always optional, but some aspect of it can be how we do it, when we do it, where we do it, that kind of thing. Also, forced fun is never fun. So leaders out there, please, if you remember nothing else from this, forced fun is never fun. Remember that. Write it down. Tattoo it. Oh, see, I got off my list. All right. Personal, joyful, beneficial, iterative, optional, seemingly purposeless. So lots of play have really cool outcomes, like amazing, but whatever the outcomes are can't be the reason we're doing it. We have to be playing for the sake of the play itself. That lends in closely to seventh characteristic, which is, maybe that's 8, intrinsically motivating. It's not, it's the 7th, intrinsically motivating. So we can't be doing this for external validation or reward. Again, that can't, we might get it, but that's not the reason we're doing it.
Gotcha.
And then intrinsic motivation is a little bit deeper than just not external. So it needs to actually hold some sort of meaning to who we are at our core. If you look up the real definitions of extrinsic versus intrinsic. And then the 8th one, got 'em all, is actively engaging. And this trips up people a little bit because a lot of people, modern adults, will say reading is my play, but that's not physical. But it doesn't have to be physically engaging. It can be cognitively or mentally engaging.
Oh, I
And
love
then
that.
there's like a bonus one, which is socially interactive, because if you don't want it to be socially interactive, then adding a social component will backfire. But if you like the play to be social, then we talk about oxytocin and it kind of levels up the benefits. So,
Awesome.
so that's play.
That is, it's funny, as I was listening, I was thinking about things that I love to do. I was mentioning earlier how I take virtual piano lessons. And so I was trying to think in my head, does it match all of those things? And I mean, it really does. It doesn't feel like work, even though I think when I look back into my childhood when I was taking clarinet, which I did not enjoy,
Right.
it was required. There were all these things that didn't make it play, whereas now piano has no bearing on my livelihood other than just to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You already have a play. That's awesome.
What about you, Jeanne?
That's cool. I'm thinking about things that I do to play, and this is actually a deeper question because my therapist was asking me this the other day, like, what do you do for yourself just to play? And I was like, well, I love to meditate. And she's like, yeah, but you do that because of your anxiety. So what do you do just to enjoy? I'm like, well, I exercise every day. And she's like, yes, but again, like you do this to be healthy and to. So I'm thinking about it. I used to play guitar. I love guitar. And I kind of lost motivation with that, with this like whole journey, but I'm slowly getting back into that and I'm slowly finding some stuff. But this is such a great episode because it's making me think also, like, what do I do just to enjoy, where I'm not like looking after somebody or figuring something out or making sure everything is working. And it feels so silly, a silly question that you can easily answer, but then when you think about it, it's pretty hard.
So it's really common. I get way more conversations like what you were saying, Jeanne, than somebody, this is what I do for play. Modern adults, average working adult especially, we've just been so far removed from play and ourselves for so long that it's really common. You are definitely not the only one, Jeanne, at all.
But that brings up a really good point about why it is so crucial for adults. And I'm also curious of your thoughts on why culturally we don't encourage it enough. And it makes me think of my art therapy clients, where when I started this work, I worked with primarily children, and it was an easy sell. Art therapy. Yeah, art therapy I did it all the time.
Yeah.
And now I find with my adults, especially when I'm first working with them, unless they come for art therapy, they are not interested. They have to almost know me and have been working
Mm-hmm.
with me for so long to feel like it's okay to go there. Because the art therapy is not supposed to be a product, it's a process, and it can be playful.
Absolutely. So I will try to be brief on this because there's a lot. So it started with the farming communities. That's how far back it goes for like
Oh,
human.
wow.
Wow, that
So,
and time, what is it? The
right? Yeah.
time thing, daylight savings.
So, the hunters and gatherers spent up to
Yeah.
50% of their daylit hours in leisure activities, just doing whatever
Huh.
they wanted to do. And I mean, I would like,
What would
before I
this
read the
involve, though? Throwing
so
rocks or?
well so when we moved to farming communities, we had to start following a schedule because what are the seasons doing? What time of day is it? We have to do certain things at certain times, and it limited our nomadic exploration because we had to be near
Hmm.
water and certain soil. So
Mm.
hunters and gatherers, go where you want, when you want. Farming community, we're starting to place restrictions about living and being human and surviving. And then the Industrial Revolution, hello, children in factories 6 days a week. Right. So
Mm.
that moved through. And then I mentioned before that everything they taught us in school is not right. They used to tell us that our brains, our prefrontal cortex, actually, I'm curious if you guys were taught this, that our prefrontal cortex was fully matured around your mid-20s.
I've heard that. I've heard variations related to neurodiversity where it does take longer.
So
For neuro,
yeah, but that's
right,
brand new stuff.
right,
Like
absolutely.
10, 15 years ago, they were like 25, that's it. Good luck.
Yeah,
If you're
26 for boys.
right, yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And if you
Yeah.
weren't well developed at that point,
Right.
good luck being an adult. Which was really wrong. So then you think, well, why bother playing? Because the thing about play is that that part of our brain does not change over our lifespan. And as you
Yeah.
guys know, and probably many of your listeners know, our brains are very efficient. We don't,
Hmm.
it doesn't hold on to things that we don't need. Infants, newborns are born with a number of reflexes that they don't keep. The brain integrates it. We don't need that anymore. The circuitry for
Mm.
play is the same across our lifespan.
Mm.
So when we're in play, those 8 characteristics, when we're doing that, experiencing that kind of activity, the neurochemistry that happens is the same for a 6-year-old to us. The
Oh, and
difference is
it doesn't become phased out. It's always available. Is that what you're
always
saying?
there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, and then another tricky part is that prefrontal cortex is there getting in the way because that's our CEO of our brain, right? It's
Mm.
following rules and making harder decisions. And maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should do this instead. Some of our inner critic self-talk can come from there. So that kind of gets in the way. So it's all of that leading into adulthood where we go, oh, I don't have time to play.
Mm.
And then, oh, go ahead, Jeanne.
Yeah, I was just curious. Do you think this is why maybe the research has changed recently? Maybe about not as far as I know, the Swedish culture is so less affected by anxiety and so much more well adapted. I mean, I think they've won the prize or title of the happiest kids in the world and the most well-adjusted children in the world because their model is hugely based on play. Like the kids don't have homework, they don't attend school for as long. So do you think that's where they led from in terms of that?
1,000%. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know much about Sweden specifically, but Denmark, they're the happiest country. And some
Yeah.
reports will tell you they have like sidewalk trampolines
So
built
cool.
into their
Yeah.
cities, so, and
Yeah.
going back to what play is optional, beneficial, that a simple jumping up and down on a trampoline that will benefit your brain for longer than you are on the trampoline.
Ooh, then I play. I have a play.
Yay!
I have a trampoline in my office and I jump on it when I
Perfect.
feel too anxious.
Amazing.
You
I
and
love
Tony
it.
Robbins.
That's fantastic. I want a trampoline in my office. Just a second. That's a great idea. Yeah. So when we do whatever the activity is, playing the piano, jumping on the trampoline, whatever it is for you, a puzzle, our brain releases dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, norepinephrine, brain-derived neurotropic factors, anandamide, all of these things that are responsible for everything that's good for us, regulating our stress, the feelings of joy, improving our creative thinking, better problem solving, all of that leading into easier collaboration, improved communication. If it's jumping on the trampoline and physical activity, then you've got it's good for your body too. So play brings about all of that. And all of that also, those neurochemicals leading to neuroplasticity. So the ability of our brain to continue to learn and grow. So one of my favorite trends recently on social media is rec therapists at like nursing homes or rehab facilities, making the balloon games or the cups. Have you seen any of those going around? They're pointless games with the residents of their facilities, but the joy on these people's faces. And I think it could be really cool if we start to study that and look at that over time and see what kind of differences we have as far as, a lot of our elderly generation end up isolating themselves, that kind of thing. So seeing some change in that with that, because that part of their brain is still there. Disease process and disorders aside, of course, but healthy, typical brains play all your life.
And you were bringing up all of the different neurochemicals and the positives that we get out of this. And it made me think about the specific highly sensitive brain and how the highly sensitive brain processes everything in life so much more complexly and with so many further layers. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the importance of play for the highly sensitive brain, because the highly sensitive brain, as research has shown, has a much, much more active limbic system as compared to non-highly sensitives. So I know that this is probably a new area to look into, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Sorry, can I just ask, Amelia, could you just explain for our audience what are we talking about when we're talking about the limbic system? Like, what does that affect?
Sure. Good point. So the limbic system is sometimes called the reptilian brain, the much more the older portion of the brain that's responsible for basic biochemical experiences in the body, digestion, rest, self-regulation. And there's parts of the brain in the limbic system, like the amygdala and different areas that signal to us whether we're safe. And it also signals whether we can be socially engaged. So, and feel safe in doing so. So if you have a more active limbic brain, because you're more observational. Case in point, we were playing last night with our kids. It's funny, we have all these toys and we end up playing with balloons or like random things the most.
Yep.
And so we were playing with the bottom of the balloon weights. They had these smileys, and one of them was a specific smiley and the other two had two other images. And so that game where you shift the cups around and you have to figure out which cup has the ball? So we were playing that kind of with them flipped over. And my daughter and I, who are definitely both HSPs, were killing it. My husband, who is not an HSP, he's very sensitive, but he's not an HSP, was grumbling the whole time because he kept not being able to locate it. And it's because, according to research, HSPs have much, much more attunement visually. So we're better at like hidden pictures or the study was these two black and white images of these barns, and you had to find the differences between the two, and HSPs far outperformed.
Oh, wow.
That also means the HSP brain and eyes are working harder most of the time. So hopefully that unpacks what I mean by the importance of play for the HSP brain and how the HSP brain is just so much more active in those areas. Thank you for the clarifying question, Jeanne.
So you mentioned earlier too, the neurodiversity and
Mm-hmm.
consideration of that. So there's this much research on play for adults. There's a tiny fraction of it on play and really true good brain activity on actual adult diagnosed,
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, whatever it may be. So I don't have a solid answer, right? But when you think about what play does for us, so with the game example, what play can be for us is a way. What is it for kids? It's practicing being an adult.
Yeah, a way to learn, a
Baby
way to
animals, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
connect, get
that's what
energy
baby
out.
animals play. They are
Mm-hmm.
learning to be an adult. When they pounce and they go down and they're the wolf pup or something. They're
Mm-hmm.
pretending they're learning to hunt, right? There's the old pictures of tribes where a toddler's carrying a huge machete, right? And then they're just playing because that's what their dad carries, a huge machete to get through the jungle, So that's what play is. Play is low stakes practice for
Mm-hmm.
human skills.
Mm.
So if we can, we're lending into sort of the mindset territory here, which I love a good mindset shift, but how deeply scientific is it? But if
Yeah.
we can take that mindset shift of that game is just low stakes. It does not matter what happens in the end, like you mentioned with your piano, like who cares what it actually sounds
I'm
like?
not going to perform at a recital.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that lends into being a safe space for you.
Mm.
So, and that's a whole hour, half hour
Yeah,
that
20
you
minutes.
get to 20 minutes that you get to just spend.
Don't tell my teacher.
that you're spending without concern for the future and worry, and you get
Yes.
to focus on something and practice your really cool brain skills and your great things that you're good at without a
Yeah.
concern for what it means.
Mm.
So giving our brains time and repetition of practicing feeling like that can carry. It's like mindful breathing, right? The more you do your mindful
Right.
breathing at home, practicing on your chair, that's when you're in traffic and realize, I didn't flip that guy off. I just took some deep breaths. Good job, me. So play's kind of the same way.
It kind of makes me think of the research points to 2 hours of unstructured time alone for HSPs a day is
Yeah.
important. And it seems like as a highly sensitive person or a neurodiverse person, or even really just someone under a lot of stress, if you can integrate play into that time, it almost accelerates or accentuates the benefits of the time, is basically what I'm
I
hearing
would
you
be
say.
willing to support that hypothesis for the next study.
We're
Yeah.
going to start an institute now to
Yes.
study this.
Listen, that is, you know what? If you've got a listener who is interested in that, I have so many research ideas for this that I would
That's
love to see it come to
amazing.
fruition, but I'm not going back to school. So there's that.
I would be curious to ask though, from like a practical standpoint, if you were to do these types of integrations in a work environment with a team, and you're coaching this for them in their team building retreat, or what would you then be recommending? That they have trampolines in their office, or that they're painting in their breaks, or like what does that practically look like?
So for corporate teams, really any kind of organizational teams, the best part about play is that concept of the more you do it, the more you do it. Excuse me. So when we think about creative thinking, problem solving, innovation, brainstorming, when we're at work, we're doing all of those things, and it is high stakes, high pressure. You're expected to perform. But if we give our teams and each other the ability to practice it in low stakes situations, then we start to see the flow of those neurochemicals that we need for all that stuff, the critical thinking, the problem solving, nonlinear thinking, pattern recognition, all that kind of stuff start to happen more often. And the way we do it depends on the team, because remember, our first characteristic of play is it's personal. So there's a lot that goes into it about, figuring out who does what well, who enjoys what. It's a deep dive into the culture side of leading a company or leading a team, but it's necessary too, because you can't just throw play at a team. That's why ping pong tables and kegs in offices don't do any good.
It might do something.
Right. Yeah. So aside from digging into and doing like a full culture audit, which I offer, is simple things that are generally universally enjoyed. So I often recommend that people cover their ping pong table, get rid of the net, and just lay out a bunch of Lego bricks.
Oh,
just
okay.
to have and to walk by and do with what you will. Another thing that is a little bit of a creative outlet. It's a break. Breaks are important. Compare that to exercise science. You have to take breaks. You just have to. That could be a whole episode on its own. But the other sort of bonus thing about having something like a Lego table is that it encourages communication. So Amelia, you've stopped at the Lego table and you are building something, and maybe it's starting to become obvious that it's a house. And Jeanne, who's a completely different department from you, is also walking down the hall, and she sees you searching for something, and maybe she can tell, like, oh, you're looking for the leaf elements, and I see it over here on the side of the table. And she reaches across and hands it to you. Here you go. That's a cool tree. And then you're talking to each other, when in a professional situation, you may not need to talk to each other. Amelia, you're a custodian, and Jeanne is a account manager or something.
Yes, I am.
Where normally, right. But normally there wouldn't be like a crossover, and now all of a sudden you're communicating and you're building a relationship in a really low stakes way, because it's
low
a
pressure.
Lego
I love
tree.
that.
Who cares? And then the other part of it, especially with maybe our more serious teams, because work will always be work. Work will always have hard aspects. There's conflict. There's very serious decisions to make. So I'm never coming into a team and say, there's no toxic positivity in my world. We're not coming in, just be happy about it. None of that. But what we can do is introduce tiny little playful elements. So Rene Proyer, I think I mentioned him already, researches play as an adult personality trait. And his definition of playfulness is the ability to reframe any situation to be interesting, entertaining, or stimulating. Fun is not in that definition. So when we're thinking about what we can do to make work playful, fun has nothing to do with it at all.
It's thinking outside the box.
Entertaining or stimulating, those can be really different things. And a lot of the things, so Rene Proyer also has 4 personal play identities. One of them is intellectual. And when I work with intellectually playful people, one of the first things they say is, oh yeah, no, that's my favorite part of work. I would never use the word fun to describe it. I'm like, I know, but it's interesting and stimulating. So it is playful, even though it might, like, fun's not the right word. So,
and then what are the, I can't help, what are the other 3?
So intellectual, whimsical. Rene Proyer calls it other directed. I tend to use the word relational. It's, with others. And then the last one's lighthearted. That's what people usually think of when they hear play, is the lighthearted, playful identity. But there's 3 others that are wildly different.
So could one beg to differ that going down a rabbit hole on Google, looking something up that you find interesting to be intellectual play?
1,000%. Yeah. Which is why
That's
I really
interesting.
want to start seeing some adult play research on autistic and ADHD brains specifically. And now that I'm getting to know you guys, HSP brains.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, because I think it's going to be wildly different. I have ADHD, and I'm about to share an example of why. You asked me, like, at the beginning of this about the 4 phases, and I never got to it. Do I mention that now?
Yes, and I think that the 4 phases, that was something I loved about your TED Talk, was as an HSP, it helped me understand what kind of recovery time I need, and that's a big part for
Mm.
highly sensitives. So I would love if you could introduce that because I did not want us to miss the frosting on the cake.
There are a lot of people when they think about the flow state. Not everyone's heard of it. Not everyone is sure that they've ever experienced it, but it's a pretty common kind of, oh yeah, I've heard of that. It's like being in the zone,
Mhm.
in flow. Things are just flowing. It's attributed a lot to extreme athletes where
Mhm.
they get into the flow, skiers and snowboarders. That's sort of an easy access.
And
But
could I ask you one question, one qualifier about
yeah, oh
flow?
yeah.
In my research on ADHD for one of my upcoming books, I encountered that flow is more seen to be more common in the ADHD brain, especially when you look at the phenomenon of hyperfocus.
Yeah.
So I was curious
Yes.
about that.
I will throw that in because it's one of
Yeah.
my favorite parts of all of this. Well, favorite because it's relatable. Anyway, so, but everybody thinks of it as you're in flow or you're not in flow. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
Csikszentmihalyi told us that the average adult gets into flow most often at work. That was from he did
That makes sense.
extensive
Mhm.
studies. Yep. Finding that average adult flow is at work. And then Herbert Benson, who I mentioned before, he is the one who he founded the, I believe it's called the Mind Body Institute at Mass General, Boston, somewhere up there. It
We'll
still
fact check
exists.
it for
We'll
you.
fact check that.
Yeah.
But Herbert Benson's definitely his name. So I got that
Mhm.
part. But he discovered that really it's not about just being in flow and out of flow, that it's a cycle of 4 stages. So the first stage is struggle. These are not cleverly named. They are not scientific names. Struggle is a struggle. You are doing something hard. It might be repetitive. You're kind of learning, you're struggling through. And during that stage, we get cortisol and adrenaline. And cortisol, in a way that it's what our body naturally produces, is actually a more motivational hormone,
Mhm.
not stress at its purpose. Cortisol doesn't hate you and want you to be stressed. It just
Mhm.
wants you to motivate you to brush your teeth or whatever. But so struggle phase is the struggle, and that's the first phase. The second phase is release. Again, not cleverly named. You are releasing yourself from the struggle phase. So you release yourself from whatever that task was that you were doing. So stepping away completely. Just physically removing your body from the computer if you've been there for a long time, whatever it is, putting your mind on something else. Stephen Kotler, that I mentioned before, that really took Herbert Benson's research and has started to apply it to corporate teams working with Deloitte and USC, all kinds of things, is discovering that it's a when you walk away from it, that's the transition into what we know of as flow. So during the release phase, we release, again, not clever, nitric oxide, flushing out the cortisol and the adrenaline, which prepares our body and our brains ready for the flow stage, which is the third stage. And that's when you're so focused. There's 8 traits of this too. Those come from Csikszentmihalyi. These are definitely not going to be able to remember all of them, but they all culminate to a full merger of actions and awareness. You don't know what's going on outside of you. You are fully immersed in whatever the task is at hand. And the coolest part is that you love it and you're really good at it. So whatever you're doing in flow, you're fantastic at it. So whatever you produce in flow is going to be really good.
That's really cool.
The third stage. Excuse me. And that's where I started to see all of that overlap, because the neurochemistry of the third stage of flow is just like play. It's the dopamine, it's the serotonin, it's the endorphins, it's the brain-derived neurotropic factors, it's anandamide. So all of that is happening in flow, but it is one, Stephen Kotler's definition of it is an optimal experience where you feel your best and perform your best. A lot of
Mm.
people will call it peak performance or peak experience. So physics, you can't stay at a peak forever. You have to come down.
Mm.
So even if people have realized that things are hard, you move away from it, then you get the good ideas, like a shower ideas. You know, people say all the time, oh, I was just in the shower
Those are my
and came up
favorite.
with this great idea. So that's a release phase. So a lot of people can really, really relate to that. But the one that does not get talked about enough is recovery, because we go through flow, we do kick-ass work, we feel really good about it, and then we come down. And Stephen Kotler actually compares, I forget which one is which, but he compares all of the neurochemicals that we get during flow, like specifically to street drugs. So you
Wow.
really are coming down. The only one I remember is an anandamides like THC. And his point is, if you take all of those, you'll die. But when they come from your brain in the right doses, they're wildly beneficial. But you still have to come down from it, even though they were natural. So you're coming down, you start to feel real crappy. A whole separate talk on, I think imposter phenomenon originates in this era because you just created something that is objectively excellent. And then, so during flow, I forgot to mention my favorite part. ADHD. During the third stage of flow, our prefrontal cortex turns off. Not off, but down. So it's called transient hypofrontality. And so the CEO of our brain is like, I'm going on vacation. Have fun, the rest of the brain. And then
that's interesting.
So creativity starts to flow and nonlinear, and you start to see ideas and you're trying new things.
Oh, yeah.
And your should part of your brain isn't in the way, telling you to stop. That's also where we perceive time passing, our prefrontal cortex. So that being turned down, we don't know. We've been doing this for 3 hours or only 10 minutes have gone by and we completed a ton of work, that kind of thing.
Gosh, I wish I had spoken to you about this while I was writing, because I wrote about this and it made sense to a degree, but what you're saying is clicking so much more, because when you think about the differences in the neurodiverse brain with the prefrontal cortex, when you think about time blindness, which I don't love that term, but it's the research term that we're currently using. Like, all of those things have to occur to get you to be so immersed in something that you are so stellar at it.
Yeah.
And then I think about this fourth phase that you're saying, the come down phase, and I'm hypothesizing that phase might be longer for sensitive brains.
I would support that too.
That's just my assumption.
Yep. Because it's already, our neurodivergent brains are already working harder on a regular basis. And then we throw ourselves into flow and it's even more heightened.
Yeah.
So I would support that as well.
Wow.
So the recovery
that would
phase,
make sense.
that last stage, but it gets ignored because society tells us, hustle culture, what do you mean rest? Sorry, you have work to do. So you just did something, probably at work, because the average adult gets into flow most often at work. You finish something, it's amazing, and your brain is like, can I get a minute? Can I take a minute? And actually your body too, because some of those neurochemicals, it's why the extreme athletes are able to do what they do, because some of the neurochemicals are responsible for reducing your perception of pain, and heightening strength. So,
interesting.
When you have that happening, even at a low level, working at your desk, you're just more tired. So this recovery phase, you created something. Nobody else in the world cares that you're like, wait, I don't like this as much as I did 10 minutes ago. Also, I'm really tired and in a terrible mood because your dopamine your serotonin has dropped, your endorphins are gone. But nobody cares. Just get back to work. And then also there is, I'm seeing some articles coming out about like, chasing dopamine nation, that kind of thing. So when people are able to find flow for themselves and not do it on accident, they're like, well, I got to get right back in. Let me just get right back into the flow. And then we're just skipping this recovery stage altogether. So it's definitely the most important one. And the two things to do during the flow stage are rest,
Mm-hmm.
which is sleep, not sitting on the couch watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even relaxation meditation unless you are fully trained in relaxation meditation. Like it's
Right.
legit, which
Mm-hmm.
most of us modern folks are not.
Mm-hmm.
So rest, sleep, like go to sleep. Take a
Right.
nap if
Yeah.
it's the middle of the day. Make sure you get a good night's sleep that night. That's just top number one. I know it's hard for working adults, but I'll speak to that in a minute. And then the next point is to play, because we talked about that play. When we have
Mm-hmm.
those 8 characteristics, whatever it is we're doing, we're boosting our dopamine again. We're boosting our serotonin. All flow is play, not all play is flow. So we're not going to go as high as a peak experience. You know, we're
Mm-hmm.
not way up here with our dopamine and all those things, but it's just, it'll get us back above baseline where we're going to feel
Mm-hmm.
a little bit better.
So that's when I think about the essence of what we really wanted to explore today. The two things that I'm hearing, other than a million interesting things that I want to go research further, is first of all, that the rest period is so much more productive than we give credit,
Yes.
right? And when we get so hyper focused on productivity, it pulls us away from the two important things that we need to perform the best and to feel the best we can, which are play and rest. And to say, "Ugh, I feel bad for not being productive or not being on top of things," but you are, because play
Yep.
and rest is part of that cycle.
Yep.
And I appreciate you giving that permission and giving the neurochemical science behind why it's so important.
Yes.
Yeah, that's big. So I'm curious, if you think about all the things that you presented today, what do you think are, if you could give like the top 3 things you hope someone walks away and thinks, I'm going to change these 3 things about how I either play or rest to take care of my beautiful brain?
So my favorite one is to lean into that definition of playfulness. That
Mm-hmm.
play doesn't have to mean it. If you have the means and the time to take piano lessons and it's something you enjoy, do it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're one of the millions of adults going, I can't, I don't have time for this. How can
Right.
you make your normal routine interesting, entertaining, or stimulating? If you listen to my TEDx, it involves singing. I will not sing on your podcast. But they're simple things. And a lot of times people look at me and go, well, I already do that. I'm like, okay, just tell yourself it's play. Again, with the mindset shift. That's a simple, like, oh no, I'm forgetting the phrase. Just not biofeedback, but the more you tell yourself that it's play, you'll just feel better. I don't know what
Right.
I can't think of that term. Anyway,
Positive.
Yeah,
reinforcement.
you will start believing that. Yeah.
Something like that.
Right.
So adding playfulness into your life, into what already exists.
Mm-hmm.
For my corporate people, forced fun is never fun. I should get a tattoo on my back. That's my
Or
big
just
one.
right here, because then
Right
we'll all
here.
see it.
Right
But
here.
backwards.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that,
Yes, so you can read it. And then also, I think maybe, I'm guessing you have quite a few women listeners, probably. So if we, or
Yes.
just caregivers in
Shout
general.
out to all the men too.
Yes, yes.
Hi, Dad. No, I'm just kidding.
But when we think about caregivers and the responsibility that we often feel that we have to play with our children, and a lot of us will go, well, I play with them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's not play.
I am so happy you said something about that, though. I just want to mention that you had mentioned the 4 different types of play, like personalities. And I am not good at sitting down and imaginary play with dolls. It just, my brain just goes
Same.
offline. But
Yeah,
I'm very, but I love play with like creating art or going on a hike or baking or so. I want to unpack. I'm going to look into that further on my own play personalities, and I don't know if there's a good resource to share.
I'll share the research article. Yeah, personal play
Awesome.
identity. If you look up play
Okay.
personalities, you'll get Stuart Brown's work, which is a little bit more about what you do to play. And Renee Proyer's personal play identities are more about like who you are and how playful
Awesome.
you
I'm
are.
going to look into that.
But recently, Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach and Amanda, their podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, Glennon just outright says, play with your children is work, it's not play. And it's so true. So just knowing that as a human, even dads, whatever if your child is asking you to play and you are dreading it, that is normal and okay. Offer them something else. Still play. I'm not saying never play with your kids, but just know that you need to also find your own play as well.
I love that. Thank you for that permission.
So where can our audience find you? Where can they go to learn more about you, to see your offerings?
So I'm located geographically outside of Denver, Colorado, and I am starting to put on some in-person workshops. So if anybody's nearby, those are starting to happen at least every other month, maybe more coming up. Just did one yesterday on the personal play identities. And
Awesome.
my whole room was intellectual. It was kind of wild this time. But my website is www.playfulworkdesign.com. On LinkedIn, I'm not probably the only Acey if you just search that on LinkedIn. And then Instagram and X, I am be boardless, like the verb be boardless. So I'm pretty active on all of them. And I love to hear from people how you play, how you realized that was play, like Amelia's piano. And Jeanne, trampoline.
I think I'm very playful, actually. And when I'm not playful, I'm not as nice.
Yeah.
Oh, Acey, thank you so much for coming. I loved learning all this stuff and being able to integrate it into some of the fabulous things that we want to explore with our listeners. And you are you are truly a dynamic speaker.
Oh, thanks.
And so it was so thrilling to have you. And I'm so grateful that you joined us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And
a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yay.
Yes. Okay. Bye, everyone.